they've finally done it. After more than a decade of re-releasing Skyrim in various editions on a myriad of consoles, Bethesda Game Studios has finally allowed something new to squeak through their doors. Starfield, the long-awaited interstellar adventure, is here. The legendary studio has made a sizable hullabaloo out of the fact that this marks their first new IP in 25 years. But I'm still not sure if that's supposed to be taken positively or negatively. It's also the first game they've released since Fallout 4, nearly 8 years ago, which is something of an accomplishment on its own. Having seen the literal new universe they've created for Starfield and where this new narrative goes, it definitely feels like something they wanted to hit hard after 2.5 decades of sequels. But did it stick the landing? Find out in this review of Starfield on Xbox Series X, since, you know, that's the one of 3 places you can play it. Thanks, Microsoft. I usually dedicate this next portion of my reviews to talk about the developer of the game I'm reviewing, but it's unlikely that Bethesda needs any kind of introduction for our Starfield review. They're the purveyor of genre and era-defining Western RPGs like The Elder Scrolls, the last 2 Fallout games, and, well, that's about it. Unless you count IHRA Professional Drag Racing 2005. I don't. Bethesda has subsisted mostly on its publishing side over the past few decades, but when a new game that they developed is launched, it's usually something of a cultural moment. Starfield is no exception. The promise of the studio's signature storytelling and gameplay spread out among more than 1,000 planets had everyone chomping at the bit to play it, myself included. So why was I so surprised to find that Starfield, the game we all waited so long for, just kind of feels like another Bethesda game? Just the next one in a long line of Bethesda RPGs. Starfield pits you as a nobody, a lowly space miner, who happens to come into contact with a mysterious artifact. That artifact has implications for all life in the known universe, and it falls on you to track down more artifacts across different star systems. It's new narrative territory for a Bethesda game, but not new for most gamers by now. While they were making Starfield, Hello Games' No Man's Sky came, flopped, and was rebuilt into one of the most expansive, feature-packed games about life beyond the stars ever made. So by the time Starfield started asking me to do things I've been doing in No Man's Sky for the last 7 years, I was hoping it had a little more up its sleeve. And it does. Much, much later though. The comparisons to No Man's Sky don't end at Starfield's narrative, but more on that later. The standard RPG fare applies to Starfield's opening. You'll create a character using a substantially detailed creator system. Select one of the several interesting backgrounds that determine how you'll play the game, and then pick up to 3 skills for a few spicy experience modifications. My personal build of a beast hunter with an adoring fan led to some interesting interactions, but the surrounding game felt very standard for Bethesda. The main story quest missions, or errands as I've started calling them, got dry pretty quickly, but thankfully there are plenty of interesting random encounters and tons of dense side missions to pad out the experience. In classic Bethesda fashion, some of the best content in the game is in the side content. I've seen some people suggest that you beeline through Starfield's main quest line so that you can enjoy the side content and post-game sooner, and I'd say that's not a bad course of action. Once you slog through several dozen hours of main story quests, the ending payoff and how the post-game is structured are very interesting. Does it make all of those rote missions worth it? Not for me, but it seems to be working for many others. In terms of visuals, Starfield is a clear evolution of what Bethesda has brought to the table in recent games. The stiff dialogue interactions complete with full-on face zoom-ins are still there, but the lip-syncing and subtle facial animations are on a whole other level, as well they should be. A big controversy going around just before and right after Starfield's release was the fact that you can't really explore entire planets all at once. And despite there being hundreds upon hundreds of planets you can observe and interact with, most of them are barren and not really worth visiting. All of that is true, but it's 1, accurate, and 2, playing to Bethesda's strengths. Rather than randomly generating a bunch of nonsense for you to see on every planet that doesn't serve any purpose for Starfield itself, you have a handful of planets with well-designed, handmade settlements full of people and things to do. Every settlement or village I encountered had a cool story to tell. Every planet I visited, both inhabited and uninhabited, looked pretty cool, and that was good enough for me. A major standout is the massive, gleaming hub world of New Atlantis, which contains spires of shining glass and architecture that gave me hope for a future we might never get to see. We've come far enough in video game technology and hardware that environments can look about as real as they need to, so everything comes down to art direction and performance these days. The designs on the space stations, planets, and outposts in Starfield are all what I would call generically sci-fi, but I mean that more positively than it sounds. There were plenty of times when I could have fooled myself into thinking I was playing a pretty awesome Alien game, something that doesn't happen very often these days, or even an Outland game, something that has never happened as far as I can remember. Being a sci-fi nerd, Starfield was always going to scratch a certain itch for me, but having it absolutely nail that 80s sci-fi aesthetic makes it that much better. In terms of performance, there's not much to complain about. I played Starfield on my Series X, and the game ran a pretty solid clip the entire time. The game is, of course, locked to 30 FPS, which had some fans up in arms, but it's fine. I didn't notice any dips even when the action got heavy, which is what I assumed Bethesda was aiming for. I do think some loading screens went just a little too long and I had the game crash on me at one point, but the actual minute-to-minute performance is consistent, if not all that particularly impressive. Again, if you've played a Bethesda game, you know what's in store for you in Starfield in terms of gameplay. Talk to NPCs, take on quests, explore, lather, rinse, repeat. Not all missions will require you to fight, and Starfield's persuasion mechanic gives you a chance to avoid altercations completely if you're a smooth talker. However, when you do have to fight, the combat doesn't feel how you might expect it to. They could have just used Fallout's combat system since that's been pretty successful, but Starfield's fights feel different, and not in a particularly satisfying way. Gunplay felt kind of limp and not satisfying to me, which is a shame since this is also a Borderlands-style, procedurally generated gun attribute system that looks really cool. I just didn't enjoy shooting things as much as I have in other Bethesda games, including Fallout 4, and melee combat is similarly less visceral than you might hope. Combat feels like it's there because it has to be, while the No Man's Sky-style flora and fauna scanning felt like a fun, relaxing addition. Before I wrap up this section, let's talk a little bit about what should really be Starfield's headlining feature, the thing that makes the entire game worth playing, in my opinion. The ship builder. In the shipbuilding mode, you use a variety of parts to construct your own spaceship with very few limitations. Well, it starts out a little bit limited, since you can't technically build a ship from scratch. But if you take one of your ships and delete all the parts, that's kind of like a blank slate. You buy and sell parts and you get access to more as you progress through the game. But the number of possibilities with even the base parts are impressive. People have built full recreations of Star Trek and Star Wars ships, in addition to wildly imaginative original creations. It's like a Lego system that allows you to build things that you can actually explore and fly in. The space combat was another weak point for me, but experiencing Starfield's space exploration and zooming across the galaxy in a ship I built was worth the time I spent building it. Who doesn't love some good space adventure? Starfield isn't the savior of gaming some people thought it might be. It has a handful of problems and there are aspects of it that aren't as fun as they were in other games from the same studio. However, it is still wildly expansive, full of content, and feature-packed to the point that just about anybody can find something to love about it. There's a reason PlayStation fans are upset, but at least they have Spider-Man 2 right around the corner. I don't know if I would pay full price to play Bethesda's latest RPG, Starfield, but as an incentive to try out Game Pass on PC and console, it can't really be beat. For those looking for an epic space adventure, you could definitely do a lot worse. So there you have it. Starfield and the long-awaited adventure beyond the stars may not be perfect, but it's a journey worth taking. In the vast expanse of the gaming universe, it shines as a new star, albeit with a few dim spots. Overall score, 7 out of 10.